avec nous aujourd'hui.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for being with us today in Tocqueville's Conversations 2025. Because of some constraint, you couldn't make it. So our theme today for this 2025 conversation is Europe's moment, and it appeared quite natural and obvious to invite the great European that you are, because I remind everyone that you were Vice President of the Commission, you were Commissioner as well, and the Chief Negotiator for Brexit, which gave you the recognition from all parties. You just published a book called What I've Learned from You, where you mention all the conversations you've had with French people that really struck you. So within the geopolitical context, very unstable, extremely complex that we have today, Europe is at a crossroads, a weak position, we could even say, because the old alliance with the United States is being changed because of war, because the values that it defends are attacked, because it doesn't have much weight in the resolution of world's problems. So how do you see Europe's situation today? First of all, hello everyone. And to answer this first question, and the invitation from Jean-Guillaume de Tocqueville. So first of all, I want to apologize. I usually stick to my commitments, and I was looking forward to joining you today in Tocqueville's castle, in this inspiring place with you, to share my convictions and my reflections. Today, I have the obligation to be in Briançon, at the heart of the Southern Alps, for an interministerial council with many regional elected representatives, many ministers, to prepare and organize the Olympic Games in the Alps in 2030. And the current Prime Minister has asked me to do the follow-up and the management of this project, so I must be in this meeting in Briançon. This is the reason why I'm not with you today, but thanks to this camera, I'm able to say a few words and to say how sorry I am not to be here, but also my friendship to all the participants in the Tocqueville Conversations, which is a prestigious place. I also want to say hello Pierre Figère and Commissaire Kubilius, but also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Benjamin Haddad, and also all the partner teams of the Figaro who is participating in these conversations. So I want to send my particular thanks to talk about Europe today and to think about European issues at an absolutely key moment. Today we have many reasons to talk about Europe and our worries. I don't believe that we must be fatalists or negative, but we need to be lucid. When you look back at the last 15 years, which is not that long when you compare it to the European project, the past 15 years, we have faced severe crises that were all existential crises. They could all have led to the explosion of the European Union. So the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, and I became the commissioner in charge of financial services after that, who was in charge of building the agenda. There was then the crisis, the Brexit crisis, coming from within, from one of a member country, very close to Normandy, but I was supported by friends of Mr. Trump, or by Russian networks. There was then the immigration crisis. That was an extremely severe crisis, but this pandemic that was unforeseen, but that happened, and that there will be others. And very recently, the war provoked by Russia against Ukraine, a sovereign country. And in addition to these challenges that are very severe, also the events in the Middle East, and also other challenges creating many shifts, with, for me, the worst one being climate change. So when we look at the reaction of Europeans faced with this crisis, first of all, what we notice is that we have faced this crisis being defensive. So we were in reaction. There was not many moments when we anticipated the events on the supervision of the financial stability. We didn't look at the regulation for 30 years who were useful at the beginning of this crisis, the financial crisis. So we were always in reaction, back to the wall. But we reacted. It was a solid and coordinated response, and there was no implosion of the EU as some abroad have maybe wished for. During the financial crisis, we have managed the Greek crisis in a with solidarity. We've also rebuilt the regulation agenda. This was my job as commissioner through 40 laws, through the G20 for Europe. We have dealt with the migratory crisis, and without a punishment mind, we have dealt with Brexit, asking the British people to take to learn their lessons, but without resentment. There was then the COVID crisis that has shown European weaknesses. For example, the autonomous manufacturing of medication, our lack of research capacities, but we have brought support to those who needed it, and we have coordinated our response, and we have made a decision under a French and German initiative to borrow for the first time 750 billion euros to invest and restart the economy that had completely stopped. And the last crisis that I mentioned, and it was mentioned just before, a crisis provoked by the Russian aggression on a sovereign nation, the Ukraine, and its territorial integrity. And the fight that Ukrainians are leading, not in the Union but in Europe, is a fight for their sovereignty, for their territorial integrity, but also our values, which is what justifies the fact that we are with them and that we have solidarity for them. So to answer this first question, I want to say sometimes I have doubts on our current capacity in France to be up to the challenge, and I do think that a few political parties are not up to the challenge in France. However, I think that we have reasons not to be optimistic, but to have trust and support in the European project, because it has resisted, and it allowed us to resist together rather than individually to these different crises. Does this mean that everything is working well in Brussels? No, of course not. Many things need to be corrected. For the future, there are a lot of faults and weaknesses, some sort of naivety that we need to end. But first thing is to say that we protected quite well, we resisted quite well, we've learned our lessons from the crisis, as we must learn our lessons from the aggressivity on the trade front by America, and the other crisis with China. So we have reasons to be patriot and to be European and to be proud. But we can add to that this European commitment, yes, faced with all this turmoil and this common strength that we have and that we would never have individually. You have said that if Europeans reacted together to different crises, and that Europe has many assets, starting with the belief that democratic values are superior, allowing us collectively to guarantee freedom in our civil society. So, what do you think Europe can do today to bounce back, to have a wake-up call? And I think that there is an issue that everyone is noticing today is the European governance. Despite the fact that everyone is trying to make efforts, it is not efficient and quick enough. So how do you see Europe bouncing back on the current situation, which is a difficult crisis? We must be both ambitious and lucid. Lucidity is explaining to those who doubt that we have kept our promises made by the founding fathers, Schuman, Adenauer, Gasperi, in 1950, the promise to be at peace and to keep our democracies within Europe. This project was born after the tragedy of the Second World War, a few years after the opening of the camps and the Holocaust, and some brave statesmen, politicians, who now are saying, as we've said in 1918, never again. And for this to work, they said we need to want to be together, but we need to have a need to be together, an interest to be together. And this was in 1950, and this was the coal and steel that we pooled at the time, and 1957 with the single market, the first step with the common policies, agriculture, trade, competition, and eventually with Jacques Delors, the single currency and the single market. So the promise of peace and democracy between ourselves has been respected. And if it remained the rules for us, sometimes, as we see here in Ukraine, sometimes in other countries, you don't have peace and not always democracy outside of Europe. And after all these years, after the single market, we have built what is at the 21st century our main asset, which is this single market, which is much more than just a free exchange area. It's a complex ecosystem in which lives 450 million consumers and 20 million companies. And between all of these partners, we have common rules, common standards, sometimes too many maybe. and we have regulation and a common jurisdiction with the European Court of Justice, and this ecosystem is our main asset.
I was in Peking recently, and we had in touch with the US too, and the reason why we are now respected and still respected by the Chinese and the Americans, and they have to be cautious. And the reason is that it's not foreign affairs, it's not the defense, even though we're making efforts. It's the single market. And we cannot enter the single market if you don't comply with rules and norms. So the first point, moving on about current turbulences, is that we need to preserve and safeguard this open market. We need to simplify it. We need to open new fields, but we need to protect it. We need to defend it. And this is what I did during the long negotiations with the Britons. And they got the feeling that they could have the cake and eat it. They could be married as two different people at the same time. It's not. So without being aggressive, we reminded them that they decided to leave the open market and they have to face the consequences of leaving the market. We need to preserve this open market, and we are facing serious turbulences and severe times. We are lucky to have this open market and to have it as a pillar of our development. And secondly, Jean-Guillaume, we need to say, but it's not enough. We shouldn't go to be a supermarket. We should be fully organized and well organized. We must be able to express our will to be a global actor. And I would say we have no further option than to create a political dimension of the EU because of what's happening in the world. When I talk about Europe, we have a chart with the 10 most important countries in the world. The G10 in 2010, 2030, up to 2050. In 2010, 2020, we have 4 European countries: Germany, Britain, Italy, and France. And every 10 years, one of them is removed. You no longer have the strength to be a member of the G10, where they organize the order and the chaos of the world. In 2050, only Germany remains. So we need to rely on this open market so we can remain relevant. And on top of this financial and commercial power, we should add political power. Most notably, with the possibility to have international affairs in common and defense in common. We are most of those member of NATO, and we increased our budget. A part of this budget should be allocated to autonomous and generous capacities. We need to show solidarity. We need to have equipments in common, and we should give priority to European equipments. We shouldn't be protectionist, but we need to make sure that the European money should be given to European researchers and should benefit European employees in priority. This is the European dimension. And the final point, and I'll stop here, has to do with the faults and the defects in Brussels. The Commission should do its work, but no more than this. It should do its work properly, should reduce the red tape, simplify tasks, and avoid having too many norms and standards which have hindered many initiatives. We shouldn't be as naive while negotiating. If Mr. Trump decides to adopt a short-term approach and to be aggressive with Europe, he should know, we should tell him nicely and politely that we answer to these decisions. If the Chinese wants to keep on importing equipment and objects and subsidized, items. They need to know that we'll defend ourselves and we'll define ourselves, our response. We need to correct what needs to be corrected. We shouldn't be as naive as before. We should invest together. I'm a liberal politician, but I'm not a ultra-liberal, and I think that protection is to have sanctions, potentially, but the good way is to invest together in the future, just like we did after the COVID. And we can do by borrowing together. And regarding governance, dear Jean-Guillaume, we should be lucid and honest. The European governance remains a difficult topic with 27 countries, specifically because we are not a federation and we do not want to be a federation. We don't have a European people. We are 27 countries, 27 nations, 24 languages, and I think it's crucial to say in Tocqueville and anywhere else that we want to preserve these national identities. Europe must protect the nations. And I think we need the nations to fight nationalism. And this is why the EU is so complex. It's functioning with the Commission. This is some kind of collective body. We are the councils of ministers and we have the Parliament. And it's very complex. We should get rid of red tape. We can make things simpler and give a more political dimension to what we do. We still have a long way to go. We still need to understand this complexity. It's a price to pay so we can be united without being too uniformized. And once again, I hope I answered your questions. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your understanding, and sorry for not being with you today. I'll hope I can come to see you next time. I wish you a nice day. I wish you 2 nice days of discussions on a very fundamental topic for the national interests of our respective countries. Thank you.